with all of you. We're going to have lots of time for questions. It's wonderful to be with Secretary Kerry again. I should announce that he and I have gone through this a few times before. And so I look forward to going back on some fun things. But let me just ask you first. We had a Democratic primary last night. I think everybody did well. If they can't pick somebody, are you available for the primary?
Next question.
So let's get serious. I want to go back to you because one of the big topics that came up last night, and I know that you are putting an awful lot of time in it, is trying to get people to understand the urgency of climate change and the environment, this fishbowl that we live in, and how fragile it is today. But I want to go back in time because we have young people here today that are interested in public service, interested in how this place works. You played a role in taking out what are called the Dirty Dozen. And the Dirty Dozen, people, I want to just give a little history lesson, removing these people, getting these people out of office is in part what pressured President Nixon to establish the Environmental Protection Agency. Many people might not know the EPA came from Richard Nixon, but I'd like us to go back in time to your role in all that.
Well, I was just one of many players in helping to organize. Let me stop for a minute. First of all, thank you. Nice to be with you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for a generous introduction. I accept the nomination. And thanks all of you for being here, for caring and being part of this program and taking time to come down and do this. This is so important. I just cannot tell you to get all of you involved. You must be. I'm not telling you where you have to be or for whom or what, but you have to be involved. Our democracy is troubled. And in a democracy, there's no automatic pilot. You got to work at it. And it's the you who have to work at it. In 1970, when I just freshly come back from Vietnam, I came back in 1969, the first thing I became involved in, I led veterans against the war, but it wasn't for another year. In 1969-70, we organized the first Earth Day. April 22nd, 1970 was the first Earth Day. And I became involved in that, organized in New England, and we turned out 20 million Americans, came out of their homes, all on the same day, never happened before, and said, we don't want to live next to a toxic waste site. We don't want to live next to a dump that gives you cancer. We want to drink clean water. We need clean air. You couldn't see across the city of New York or Los Angeles back then. It was so smog, such dirty air in the United States. And Rachel Carson had written her brilliant book, The Silent Spring. So we were the generation that were motivated by that and other things. And we organized, but we targeted. We didn't just come out to a good concert, a day of protest. We organized into a political movement. And by targeting the 12 worst members of Congress on the voting of the environment, we went after them in the election. And we defeated 7 of the 12. That is what lit a fire among the survivors. If you want to stiffen the spine of elected officials, let a lot of their friends lose. And that's what happened. So we passed Clean Air Act, safe drinking water, marine mammal protection, coastal zone management, endangered species, and created the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States, which no less an environmentalist, and I say this because of course he didn't care about the environment until he saw the voting, Richard Nixon signed the Environmental Protection Agency into law. That's when it began, folks. Modern day environment movement started. Inspired by somebody who wrote eloquently about what had to be done, based on science, and then we took action. And that's what we need to do today. Really, that's exactly what we have to get back to. If I can just say, I've started a new organization called...
Oh, don't say that yet. Hold that. So Earth Day 50 years, sorry, I just got to do this. Earth Day 50 years ago, what should this crowd take from that time? What are the points of similarity? And if you were to do this today, what would you create? What organization would you launch?
Okay. You just met a journalist who likes to ask his questions. He's a good friend, and I'm not going to make a joke at his expense. meaning of that is this. We made environment a voting issue. People were motivated to go out and make a change, make a difference. In 2016, when the nation elected Donald Trump, President of the United States, the turnout of eligible voters was 55.6% of Americans saw fit to vote. That's a disgrace. It's a 20-year low. And the fact is that 9% of Barack Obama's vote went to Donald Trump and 7% of Barack Obama's vote didn't even come out. So we who care about these issues began at a 15% deficit from normality. Now normality is not good enough. In 2018, when we won back the House, the turnout was higher, particularly higher among young people, but still not great. You know what young people were? Your vote, those of you weren't 18 then, but for people 18 to 25, in 2016, the turnout was 19%. That is just so beyond disgraceful, folks, I can't tell you. I've had the privilege of being an observer in elections in Sudan, Philippines, Palestinian territories, Kenya, countries in the world. I've watched people come out and stand 15, 18 hours to get to vote, to have a little ink imprint put on their thumb that said they voted, so they wouldn't come back and do it again. And machine guns around, tanks around, some people being killed to dissuade them from going out to vote. They came out to vote. Here we are, supposedly the greatest democracy in the world, we don't vote. That's why you wind up with what you have today. 19%, you know what it went up to in 2018? It went up to 31%. So what? 69% still didn't come out to vote. So you guys have an extraordinary privilege in America. You can go vote. And if you vote your issues, 70% of Americans believe climate change is a major issue. Well, if we get 70% of those people voting, we're going to win everything. So you just cannot take a pass on voting. This tweedly-dum, tweedly-dee, there's no difference, the two parties are corrupt routine is crap. This is the best chance and only way in a democracy to make a difference. And we can win back everything. We can win back all these environmental distractions of the last few years. We can gain the right to catch up, because we only have about 10 years, according to the scientists, to reduce the probability of the greatest single damage possible. That's now our goal. We're not going to stop climate change altogether. We're going to blow through 1.5, I'm sorry to say it, but 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees. And even if we did everything that's in the Paris Agreement that I negotiated, and I feel no shame in this, because it was the best we could do to get 196 countries to all move in the same direction at the same time. It's a big deal. But even if we did everything in there, we all knew we needed more. You'd still have a warming of 3.7 degrees if you do everything in the Paris Agreement. And the truth is, we are headed to 4 or 4.5 degrees right now. And emissions are going up in the United States, up in China, up in India, up around the world, up in Europe. This is insanity, folks. That's why some of us are so angry about it and are voicing this everywhere. So I started an organization called World War Zero. World, because the whole world has to be involved. War, because they have declared war on science, on common sense, on facts, on literally the welfare and security of Americans who are now dying in fires, floods, in storms, in droughts, all of which are more intense because of climate change.
And you've got the Terminator working with you.
I got Arnold Schwarzenegger and Governor Kasich of Ohio, Republicans. I've got Christy Todd Whitman, the former governor of New Jersey, Republican governor. I've got Republican secretaries of defense, Bill Cohen, Chuck Hagel. We've got former President Clinton, former President Carter. I mean, a whole bunch of people. And we have people from different walks of life. Leonardo DiCaprio, Ashton Kutcher, Jaden Smith, I mean, a bunch of people from Hollywood, a bunch of people from the writing, from arts, from academia, the former president of MIT. I mean, these are thoughtful people. Stan McChrystal, the former general, the former active duty general who was in command of all our special forces is on there. And these people are saying this is an emergency. So I want every single one of you to go to worldwarzero.com, sign up. We'll be increasingly giving you a toolkit that you can use to begin to organize, to work things. There'll be increasingly videos. We're just in our early stages. But we're working with Climate Strike, with Fridays for Future, with Sunrise Movement, with others, because we all have to be in this together in order to create the voting issue that I talked about earlier. Now let me just tell you, just before I walked in here, sorry. This appeared on Breitbart today. I never get Breitbart, but somebody sent it to me. John Kerry wants Trump to defeat climate change, not terrorists. John F. apostrophe N, John F. Kerry, this is their quality of their work, guys, wants President Trump to focus his efforts on
I just want to
defeating...
say the Hill is better. Maybe not much.
On defeating, get this, on defeating the unicorn of climate change. They're still in denial, folks. And present danger of instead of the present danger of terrorism. Then he goes on, here's their response. Oh, this is my favorite part, quote, this is the writer writing. This is my favorite part. Americans are already dying from, Kerry saying, Americans are already dying from this, in fires and floods and storms and mudslides. Oh yeah, we haven't seen that before. Oh my God. People are dying in fires and floods and storms and mudslides for like the first time ever. Talk about fake news. Talk about anti-science fear-mongering. The truth is that far fewer people are dying in natural disasters than ever before. Folks, that's what we're up against. Yeah, it's just, I've never seen anything like it. It's hard to establish what truth is in America anymore. We have idiots like this who don't believe in science, who don't give a crap about what's happening in terms of reality. There's a reason we have the fires. The fires are increased in places they've never burned like this before because we have increased moisture, which drops more frequently, greater amounts, which then grows underbrush, etc., which becomes dry in the drought, and you have much more tinder for the fire. This is logical science. We deserve a president of the United States who actually believes in science.
So let's break this down. Let me ask you a question on how you do it. Is the answer to getting people to line up behind what you believe is the passion of the day, the cause of the day? Do you do this by the brute force of politics, or do you have insights in how you can draw those people in who are reading Breitbart, who have been supporting President Trump, who may have felt left behind by the system before? How do you draw them in into this so that they don't feel as if their life is being undermined by your agenda?
That's a very important and very complicated question to which there is really not a simple answer, frankly. It's not easy to begin with. We have become a country that's so polarized by a president who actually plays to the negativity and plays to the lowest common denominator, not the highest. I mean, the difference between a President Kennedy or Ronald Reagan, who appealed to America's sense of itself as a great nation and to our history. The difference between that and Donald Trump, who appeals to racism and to bashing, people who are coming across the border, which is illegal. I'm not for it. And yes, we have to deal with it, but you don't deal with it by just building up hatred against everybody. When we were in the administration, we had an influx of migration coming from Central America. And you didn't hear us beating up like this or separating families. What we did was put a program together to try to go, and we went. Joe Biden actually led the effort, and we went to Central America. We met with the presidents of Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, which is where a lot of these people were coming from, and we put a program on the table with real money to try to help them deal with violence, deal with poverty, deal with the incentives that were driving these people, and we dealt with it. So there are just, folks, there's a humane way to do things and a sensible way to do it, and then there's, of course, the Trump way, which is exploit, sow fear, create division. And what we need to do is talk to people about the truth. Now, our bet in World War Zero is we're going to go do town halls. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's part of it, former governor of California, did a lot on climate. John Kasich, Republican governor of Ohio, we're going to go to Ohio. We're going to do a town hall in Ohio. We're going to get the message out to people. We're going to take them the truth. We're going to go hand-to-hand combat, in a sense, house to house, street to street, and organize around the country so that people begin to see that the choices are much, much better. Folks, the solution to climate change is not, as Donald Trump suggests to you, a total killing of our lifestyle or an alternative reality for all Americans that's worse. The solution to climate change is energy policy. Climate change is caused by the way in which we power our automobiles, trucks, etc., the way in which we heat our homes, etc., the way in which we create electricity. It's all power. And as long as we were using fossil fuels and burning, we are contributing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And that creates the blanket over the earth which contains the heat, which provides the warning. This is a scientific theory, by the way, that was developed back in 1898 by a Swedish scientist. And it's been researched and documented many, many decades since. That's why we call it, originally it was called the greenhouse effect. Why? Because it acts exactly like a greenhouse. It creates it warmer, so you can grow your plants in the dead of winter if they're in a greenhouse. We've become that greenhouse. And now, scientists have documented all of this. You can Google any of it. You can go to because of the warming of the Arctic, the warming of Alaska, and look what it's like outside today. It's January.
Right.
It's like springtime. We just had 70 degrees in Washington the other day. We had in Boston 70 degrees. You know, lakes that used to freeze in the winter don't freeze anymore.
And it snowed in North Saudi Arabia.
And diseases that used to become dormant or disappear during the winter no longer do. Pests, insects, that used to devour trees and ravage forests only for a period of time, now are full-time, 365, you know. So we're facing different threats than we faced previously.
Let me ask you another question about how to approach it. Next week, in Washington, a few of those of you who are here, there's going to be an assembly of U.S. mayors from around the United States. And the Hill happens to be organizing a forum with both Republican and Democratic mayors. And climate change is one of the big topics that we'll be discussing. And just across the board, whether the GOP or the Democratic Party, these mayors have climate change action plans. Mike Bloomberg came out 2 years ago and said it does matter if the federal government is engaged on climate, but if they're not going to be, there are a lot of micro places, cities, states, other players, corporate sector can get this right. They can move things forward. And if you look at the energy industry today, if you look even at the Exxons and Chevrons, they are moving into renewables. You've got an informal carbon tax that some of them have done, and you've got cities moving. So my question is clearly knocking what Trump is propagating and doing is part of your campaign, but what about the other parts of the country, you know, at the next level down, where much of the country seems to be right where you want it to be?
Well, it is. No, absolutely, folks. We started a movement. I was there the day we announced it with Governor Cuomo, Governor Inslee of Washington, and Governor Jerry Brown in California. We announced the day after Trump pulled out, we announced a plan called We're Still In. And the truth is that 38 governors in the United States of America are living under renewable portfolio laws. And 7 of those are voluntary, but they're living under them. So it's about 29 states mandatory, the rest are voluntary. So 38 states equaling 80% of the population of America, are living by the Paris Agreement still, or trying to. And about 1,200 mayors, every major city's mayor in America, and many other cities, smaller cities, have signed on to stay with the Paris Agreement. So they're all doing things like buying an electric fleet for their vehicles, for their community, or setting up bus routes to keep people out of their cars, or doing recycling. I mean, the whole, new building codes, because buildings are a certain percentage of our emissions. So there's an enormous amount happening. The problem is Donald Trump is undoing the tailpipe emissions standard. He's just refused to let the EPA, just stop the EPA from having to take into consideration environment in any kind of projects in their community, so there's no longer review. So he's going backwards on this, so it has hurt. It has hurt us. It's also hurt us in this way. I led the fight. I went to China 6 weeks into being secretary. I negotiated with President Xi, and we brought the Chinese for the first time to the table to deal with climate. And we arranged, 1 year after I did the agreement, President Xi and President Obama stood up in the Hall of the People in Beijing and announced what both of our reductions would be. That is what brought us Paris. By getting China on board with the G77, the 77 less developed nations that China was leading, we changed the whole equation for negotiating an agreement. And then we got the agreement through Paris. And we have to fight to bring a country like Saudi Arabia to the table, or India, or some others. It was hard. They are now using the absence of the United States as an excuse not to have to meet higher standards. So that's why the emissions are going up in Europe, the United States, and also because, frankly, these other countries haven't done enough. We haven't done enough. We've barely done anything. And the United States and Europe hasn't done enough.
Let me ask you one last question, and we're going to go to the students here. You mentioned China, and you were our nation's top diplomat. You dealt with China and India around the world, and one of the criticisms of those who don't like tighter emissions controls, carbon controls and whatnot, is they think China's still building coal plants, which it is. China's also building renewable plants. China's building everything. But they say if we're going to constrain what we can do and raise costs in the United States, China's going to just cheat and do this. So can you give us, is there a World War Zero operation where you're talking to folks in China like you're talking to them here?
We are talking to them, not directly with World War Zero, but yes, we've got several dialogues going on with China. And you're absolutely correct, and it confounds me. I'm really angry about it. China is going to bring several hundred megawatts of power online shortly from coal. Vietnam's going to bring coal, Malaysia, Indonesia. India has a bunch of megawattage coming on from coal. I have been working for 3 years with Vietnam to get Vietnam off of coal. And I have an agreement from the Prime Minister now to allow us to build a transmission line and to try to show them that they could be completely competitive through alternative and renewable, which is cheaper than coal. But they have a coal industry that's just hanging on and pushing, and it's all vested interest.
And if I may, just for the audience, as you and John McCain are the ones that led on normalizing relations with Vietnam.
Which is why I have credibility in Vietnam. I have a 20-year history of trying to help bring our countries together after having fought in a war there. And it seemed to me by the 1990s it was absurd that we were still fighting the war. And Vietnam's become actually a very important player in terms of our presence in the region now. And Vietnam is very opposed to what China is doing. So we have interests and reasons for doing what we were doing. But the bottom line is that this coal is going to kill us. No financial institution in the world should be funding the building of a coal-fired plant. There's no reason to nowadays. We have sufficient capacity in wind and turbine and solar and hydro and natural gas, alternatives, natural gas, 50% less emissions than coal. Coal's the dirtiest fuel in the world. And we shouldn't be doing it. It's just period.
Well, with that, let's turn it over to all of you. We've got, this looks like a flash mob. So why don't you tell us who you are, where you're from, and if you can make your questions or comments very brief, we'll get through a lot of them. Please.
My name is Mark Nealon, and I'm from Seton Hill University. And Secretary Kerry, recently in the Middle East, we've been seeing a lot of, from this administration, a lot of unrest because of the recent assassination. And there's been a lot of talk about Iran potentially running up more of their nuclear power again. And considering that you were one of the forefronts on the Iran deal that we had originally in place, which was then basically ripped up by the Trump administration, how frustrating is this to watch when you've already gotten a deal done and now it's back to square one?
This is a whole nother show.
Well, obviously, and I can't pretend that it's not frustrating to see stupidity take over international affairs. And it is stupidity. Donald Trump stood up a few days ago, gave his big speech, that he gave, surrounded by military props, saying that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon while I'm president. Well, to keep that promise, all he had to do was stay in the agreement. Because we took the nuclear weapon off the table. It's the strongest, most transparent and accountable nuclear deal on the planet. And they couldn't get it. They literally, physically, would have been impossible to be able to get a deal. Why? Because we're inspecting every day every single one of their enrichment facilities. And they're limited to 3.67% enrichment. You can't physically build a bomb at 3.67%. You have to enrich to 85, 90%. We limited them to 300 kilograms of enriched material. You can't physically build a bomb with 300 kilograms. So we took the bomb off the table. And it's only back as an issue because Iran effectively has witnessed the United States of America going back on an agreement unilaterally decided upon by the President of the United States, who just pulled out without any knowledge of it. I'll lay odds, folks, he never read it. I'm confident of that. Doesn't know what's in it. And he doesn't realize that, he just didn't like it because Obama did it. We did it.
Piggybacking on his comment, you and Javad Zarif, when Javad Zarif was the foreign minister of Iran, stayed up all night because I had breakfast with you the next morning, solving a problem with Navy personnel that had floated into Iranian waters. What happens the next time that happens?
They're going to be hostages. Within 1 hour, I had an agreement. What happened is one of our patrol boats in the Gulf wandered into Iranian waters, and they took them prisoner. And they took the boat, they took the prisoners, they had them in a place. I was sitting with our Secretary of Defense in the State Department. We were doing a joint meeting with, I forget which country, and I got the note that said, we just had 15 people, blah, blah, blah. So I quickly excused myself from the meeting, went down, made a phone call directly to the foreign minister. I said, listen, Javad, if you don't want everything to blow up and this whole thing to be crazy, we got to get those guys out of there, and I need to know they're out of there now. Boom. An hour later, it was solved. Now, we got them out 24 hours next morning. We couldn't get them out to the ship that afternoon because it was too rough and everything, so we waited until the morning. But you couldn't do that now. You couldn't even have that conversation now. So this is very, very dangerous time for us. The reason Iran is threatening to and increasing their enrichment a little bit, which doesn't mean that much, frankly, in a short period of time, so it's manageable. What they're trying to do is send a signal to Europe and other countries, hey, help us out of this mess. We got to do what we got to do, but we'd rather live with the agreement. And what the administration did was declare economic war on Iran. They destroyed their centrifuges because we made them. They got rid of that stockpile of enriched uranium and sent it to Russia, which processed it. They destroyed a plutonium reactor. All the things we made them do to make sure this was real. And then we turn around, instead of lifting the sanctions, which was the agreement, they get even worse sanctions. So this is a very counterproductive, stupid arrangement, and unfortunately it happens to be exceedingly dangerous. We went to the brink of war, and the President of the United States actually outsourced the power to declare war to Iran. He killed Soleimani, And then everybody knew there had to be a response. And if Iran had killed any American in that response, you'd be at war today. So it was effectively letting Iran decide whether we went to war or not us. And he didn't even include the Congress in it, folks. We are not a dictatorship. The founding fathers specifically declared the power to declare war is in the Congress, and traditionally, the president has to go to the gang of eight, as they're called, the 8 top leaders of the Congress, to inform them of this kind of thing. They said this was imminent. So when you have seconds to make a decision, you have to do this. Well, he lied again. They made this decision in June of last year and began the preparations to kill Soleimani.
Thank you. Let's get some other questions here. Yes, right here.
Good morning, Secretary Kerry. Thank you so much for being here to speak with us. My name is Nick Cropper. I'm from the University of South Florida. And next week I'll be starting an internship at an organization that you're very familiar with, the American Security Project.
Cool.
And I'll be studying climate change and national security while I'm there. I'm hoping you can give me and everyone else here some more insight into the myriad of ways that climate change is a threat to U.S. national security.
But short form.
Well, you know, it's a long list of ways in which it is a threat. First of all, there will be massive numbers of increased refugees, climate refugees in the world. When people start not being able to live where they've lived and they have to move, it's huge instability in the process. In fact, everybody agrees that it wasn't the cause, but it was a contributor to the violence of Syria, when 1 million people had to come out of the desert because of the drought and lodge in Damascus area, and they contributed significantly to the unrest that took place in Syria. So you'll have water problems, you'll have food production problems, you'll have sea level rise problems, whole areas will become uninhabitable. You're from Florida, I'm sorry to say it, but you're already pumping water out. Your mayor of Miami is already pumping water out of the streets of Miami Beach, because on a high tide, on a sunny day, you already get water coming into the community. Floods.
Mayor Suarez is speaking at the event on Tuesday on climate change.
So you can just run a long list. The things that used to be produced in certain places will not be able to be produced in those places. As the climate changes, what crops grow where will change. Food production will change. Disease transportation will change. And the habitability of certain areas will change. Last year in Pakistan, folks, there was a city that was measuring 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And people were just dying of the heat, because the human body doesn't withstand that for very long. So there are just going to be massive changes, I'm afraid. In southern Florida, my God, you might want to open a, frogman scuba school or something and start planning on taking people to tours of the first 3 floors of some of the buildings in 100 years. I mean, it's going to change. Bangladesh will be in serious trouble. Marshall Islands, Kiribati, Palau. The president of Palau is a friend of mine. His name is Tommy Remenga. And we've been working on this issue for a number of years. He used to have the option of adaptation and mitigation as a choice. He no longer does. He's now talking about, where do I move my people? Where does my nation state go?
Trying to find land in other countries to move their population.
This is what's happening. So the consequences of this are real, they're here, they're now, and they're going to grow. And sea level rise, God only knows. I went to Antarctica and the Arctic. I saw what is happening with my own eyes. Every day, 86 million metric tons of ice breaks off of the Greenland ice sheet and flows out of just one fjord. That's enough water to take care of greater New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey for an entire year, every day. That's what's melting into the ocean. And the impact of it, we don't know completely all of these, but the ocean takes 90% of the Earth's heat. So the heat, we're already seeing the ocean increasing its heat very significantly, and that is going to change spawning grounds, fisheries, ecosystems. It's one of the reasons why we have a lot of great white sharks up in Massachusetts now.
Right. I'm asking our sponsor, we're ending at 2, right?
Yep.
8 minutes from now. So I'm going to go quickly to you, and I'm going to apologize to folks unless he gets rapid fire. So we'll, and I'm going to take you since we haven't yet. So real quick question, real quick answers, yes.
Hi, Hi, my name is Benajit Rai. I go to Keene State College in New Hampshire, but I'm an international student from Nepal. So we have the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest, but with the climate change and global warming, the Mount Everest is melting. So, and as the climate change is a tragedy of commons, but it seems that developed countries have more contribution to this tragedy, like China with 27.51% in global warming, the US with 14.75%,
Right.
India with 6.43%. And geographically, Nepal lies between India and China.
I need your question, I apologize, we're just at the
So
end.
my question for you is, so what are the responsibilities of these developed countries to the which are the greater contributor in global warming to these underdeveloped or developing countries?
Thank you, I'm gonna take your question and we're gonna combine both because we've just got a few minutes, please.
Thank you, Secretary Kerry.
Where are you from?
I'm Rowan Lucy. I'm from Endicott College in Massachusetts. With the congressional authorization in the fight against terrorism and the constitutional requirement to defend our U.S. troops, as we are still in a war on terror, why was it justified to kill al-Baghdadi and Osama bin Laden, but not Soleimani, who put the sanctions to kill 600 plus Americans, and including U.S. troops allegedly planning to strike again?
Perfect questions to end a
All right,
conversation.
really quick.
Thank you.
I'll just give you rapid fire because Steve's pushing for rapid fire, so I'll do it quickly. 20 nations are about 85 to 90% of all emissions. They are mostly the G20. They have to be responsible, huge responsibility. And we cannot solve this without a G20 that meets and decides they're going to be serious. It's that simple. On your question, Soleimani was a state actor. These other guys are non-state actors. That is a definition and distinction in terrorism. It's like if our general, Joint Chiefs of Staff, was assassinated. That's an act of war. So Soleimani was, while we designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization, you could make an argument, but it's questionable argument. I'm not going to waste my time on it. I mean, that's not the issue. Soleimani's a bad guy. Soleimani has the blood of Americans on his hands. He was meddling in other countries. There are a lot of reasons to want him eliminated from the battlefield. I object to the way it was done and the fact that it was done, without even informing people, involving people, and it took us to the brink of war in the dangerous way that I suggested. I don't think it was the best way to do it. We're smarter than that. There are plenty of ways to, if you really want to take care of Soleimani, there are a lot of ways to do it where you don't go to the brink of war.
We've given a short reprieve for a few more minutes, but yes, sir.
Hi, Secretary Kerry, thank you for coming in. So the other day we had
Who are you?
Austin Calvo, Quinnipiac University.
Thank you.
So the other day we had Sebastian Gorka come in, quite literally yelling at us about fake news in reference to videos I can pull up on YouTube and show everyone here, as many of us know. And then we had someone else come in a little bit after that and talk about how when someone says the sky is green, you can't argue with them, you can't tell them the sky is blue, the sky is green. So in reference to that, what are ways you would suggest approaching topics like that when discussing climate change with people?
Well, you've got to first be able to reestablish a baseline of truth. Facts have to mean something. I mean, my former colleague Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Senator from New York, brilliant man, had a great saying. He said, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. What Trump and some of his folks want, see that, they want us arguing over whether 2 and 2 is 5. Great distraction, waste of time. Facts are facts. And so we've got to reestablish that baseline of facts in our dialogue, and it's going to be hard fought. I'm going to be very direct with everybody here. The beginning of that is going to be getting a president of the United States who actually believes in facts and believes in science and wants to restore a norm. If we don't do that, our democracy could be truly deeply threatened.
Before I jump to our next guest here, I know you hang out sometimes and talk behind the scenes with Republican congressmen and senators. Do you find them distressed?
Yeah, they are. This is what is so tragic about where we are today. They are distressed and they are fully inundated with cowardice. I've never seen anything like it. They will sit there and say to you privately, this guy's crazy. this guy is, I hate his behavior, I don't like his character, da, 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 da. And they know what he's doing destructively, and they're scared of him. They saw what happened to Bob Corker, and they saw what happened to Jeff Flake, and they're sitting there terrorized that Donald Trump's going to unleash his legions of social media, clones, who are just going to beat up on these guys, and that'll end their career. You do not, you know what? Jack Kennedy wrote Profiles in Courage, and he once, it's a very thin book. There's a reason it's a very thin book. Not a lot of profiles. And these guys have given up their oath. When you become a senator, you say, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, domestic and foreign, blah, blah, blah. They are not doing that. They are defending their president, their party, and their personal power. And they're happier in the Senate having the chairmanship of a committee than they are having the Constitution that is being upheld in the United States. That's what's happened to us. And I'm sorry about it, because some of these guys are people I respect greatly and we're friends. And now you see a few of them starting to show a little courage. Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Cory Gardner, and every one of them has a race, and their races are different from some of the red state races. Right. So they're worried about losing their seats too.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Secretary Kerry. It's an honor to be speaking with you today. My name is Casey Armstrong. I'm from Suffolk University in Boston. And as we've been talking about, you were part of the original negotiations for the Paris Agreement, as well as the original Iran nuclear deals, both of which have been undone by the Trump administration. What can you say about these progressive agreements that were meant for the betterment of the nation and the world being undone by the fear-mongering and ignorance of Trump? And what can future generations like us do to start to undo all of this hate and fear that we've been seeing lately?
Well, I think, frankly, I do think I've answered that fundamentally. I mean, what can I say about it? It's dangerous. It's ill-informed, even ignorant. It is highly partisan. It is personal, petty, and it threatens to take the world into a very dangerous place. I mean, it's very clear what it is. What can you do about it? I already told you. You got to vote. You got to work. You got to organize. You got to be part of making sure the facts are there. Street for street, folks. Go house to house. Start talking to your parents, and go from there to your family, and then go up and down your street with neighbors. Sit down and have a conversation. Convene it on the street. Go to your school and make things happen.
Do you have on-ramps for them with your World War Zero?
Yeah. Well, we have a toolkit we're putting together. The toolkit, I'm not sure if it's up today, but there'll be a toolkit there giving you things that you can do. There are personal choices in your own life. What kind of light bulbs are you using? What kind of car are you driving? How far are you driving? You have to drive. What choices are you making about food waste, about recycling? I mean, a whole bunch of personal choices. Then, I'll give you an example. Breitbart criticizes me because I have a new house in Chilmartin, Massachusetts. Yeah, I do. But I built a solar thing. It was more expensive, but I built it. So I'm now feeding the grid. I could take this right now and tell you exactly what my house is producing today. I have an app on it. You pick it up. You can do those things. So I made that choice. I buy offsets for my travel. I mean, and I'm getting rid of my one internal combustion car I have done, and I'll never have an internal combustion car again. I'm going to buy electric as soon as I can. I can't wait to get rid of it and get electric. So those are personal choices. Then you make your community choices. What's your community doing to be responsible? What is and then you go state. What's the state doing? What's the federal government doing? What's the international community doing? All of those are the layers where things can happen. And you guys can all make them happen. You have much more power than you think. Yes. You're powerful, each and every one of you.
From the Harvard Extension School, and I wanted to ask you how you would change the minds of those in office who may be hesitant to take on long-term environmental policy in their own short terms because it's harder to see immediate and measurable change.
Make them understand it's a voting issue. And if they don't do it, you're going to kick them out. That's what motivates people in public life. Why did all those bills pass that I just described to you? Because the survivors knew that if they didn't do that stuff, they weren't going to stay in office. It's the most powerful weapon there is. Organize the electorate. Get them to see this is coming. I'm telling you what's happening now. You saw yesterday, Larry Fink The CEO of BlackRock, one of the largest asset managers in the world, has finally, and we've been beating on this for a while, said that all of their investment entities, their clients, they're going to be telling, we're going to be looking at your environmental profile, we're going to consider it. And frankly, they ought to do more than that. There's $1.9 trillion of new investment coming from banks and from investment houses going into fossil fuel projects. That has to change, folks.
Right.
So but we're breaking through. We're starting to break through. That's what you got to do, is organize it.
Yes.
Okay? It's always good for somebody from Yale to tell people from Harvard what they have to do.
I apologize, we're gonna be able to take one question, and so this will be the last one here, I apologize. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah Hico from Quinnipiac University. I'm actually from Massachusetts, so thank you so much for being here. My question is, at a time of extreme national polarization, what do you think would make it possible in this day and age for the two parties to create bipartisan efforts to negotiate or solve major foreign policy issues?
I think it's a matter of leadership. I don't think it's a matter of rules or other things. I mean, why do people choose to behave, choose the way they do? Why does one person stand up and risk their seat and another person sits quietly? It's a difference of character. It's a difference of motivation. But in the end, what we need is leadership. Leaders who will not tolerate indifference to certain kinds of things. That's what a president is supposed to do, by the way. You know, a president is not supposed to be undoing everything. I mean, where's the constituency in America to have more coal sludge in our rivers and streams? There isn't one. Oh, wait, there is. A company. A company that makes money by producing the power from the coal and wants to distribute it there because it's cheaper for them to do it. There's always a culprit. And if you don't hold the culprits accountable because you're taking apart the regulatory structure, either the Justice Department or the EPA, the enforcers, etc., we got a problem. It's called rule of law. Rule of law. We're supposed to be, and by the way, we're an experiment. The United States of America is an experiment. There's nothing preordained that we're going to hang around the way we are forever, particularly if you don't work at it. If we continue to become a country that's as unfair as we are, where as many people are screwed economically and they can't pay their bills and they can't get ahead, we're going to have a revolution. That's ultimately what will happen. So folks, I'm just telling you, the best revolution is at the ballot box. That's where you get these things done. And you've got to impress on people the importance of living our democracy to the fullest. I'll just leave you one quick. You have any more questions, people?
We're done.
Just quickly, Benjamin Franklin, when he finished the hard work of writing our second Constitution, 1787, because the first one didn't work. And they worked into the wee hours of late August, or so, I can't remember. It was in the summer, July, somewhere around there. And a crowd had gathered outside the Constitution Hall in Philadelphia for these guys when they came out. And Franklin comes out, goes down the steps, and the woman in the crowd shouts at him and says, "Tell us, Dr. Franklin, what do we have? A monarchy or a republic?" And he said back to her, he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." He was speaking to us now. If we can keep it. That's the hard work, guys. So there's no magic bullet here. There's no easy way to do it. Democracy is hard work. Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government in the world, except for everything else. That kind of sums it up. So it's hard right now with internet and lies and amazing transformation in the way we get news and how much there is out there and what's phony and what's not. It's really hard. I'm not telling you it's easy. But we have to fight for it. We have to fight for rules whereby Facebook and some of these other entities aren't putting up this phony stuff. Now, I've had my conversations with Facebook about it, about what their responsibility is, and we've just got to get this. They're not common carriers. They're not utilities. They're not subject to that sort of federal. But it could be that the government may start to take steps to some degree. I've told Zuckerberg that they've got a responsibility to make sure they're not willfully putting lies out there on the thing. It's a private platform. They can write their rules. They have the right to regulate it. So when they put a Nancy Pelosi ad up that they know is absolutely doctored and fake, they should say, no, it's doctored and fake. Somebody ran an ad the other day of Lindsey Graham and a group of Republican senators standing behind him at a podium making an announcement about how conservatives in the Republican Party supports the Green New Deal. And they put it up on Facebook. And they did it purposely, totally untrue, every word of it manufactured to show how you can do that today. And it was just a fake ad. And they put it up there to basically make the point, Mark Zuckerberg, you don't know what you're doing. But we still haven't gotten the kind of response we need to prevent that from happening. We already see Russia meddling around again. So guys,
Well,
everybody here gonna go vote, and tomorrow,